Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today on the unceded traditional territories of the Tsimshian people, specifically the Kitsilles and the Kitsim-Kalim First Nations. My name is Tracy Saxby. I am a marine scientist and executive director of My Sea to Sky. I have over 25 years' experience working as a visual science communication consultant. So what I do is I take research and data and I make it simple and easy for the public and decision makers to understand. I'd like to share a little bit about why we are here. I am a recent settler to these lands. You're going to notice that I have an Australian accent, even though I have now lived in Canada since 2001, and I've lived in Canada longer than I've lived in Australia. And I am incredibly grateful to live on the unceded lands of the Squamish Nation in Squamish, BC. It is truly my heart's home, and I am grateful every single day that I get to live in these beautiful lands that have been stewarded by the Squamish people. And spending some time in Terrace recently, I haven't been here until this last month. And oh my gosh, this is such a beautiful place. Looking at the mountains, being in the forests, walking along the rivers, like I'm truly in awe, and also grateful to the Indigenous peoples who have stewarded these lands for so long and with such wisdom. The reason that we are here this evening is to talk a little bit about the health harms of flaring from LNG. I'd like to invite all of you to take a moment to breathe in with me. A deep breath in. Breathe out. Breathe in. And breathe out. Breathe in. And breathe out. Breathing is something that we take for granted. It's something that we don't even think about. But what is in the air that we breathe? Is it clean? Is it polluted? These are some of the questions that we're going to talk about tonight. I ask that all of you listen with an open heart and an open mind as we listen to doctors and nurses and Indigenous land defenders who have travelled from across BC to be here this evening. You may hear perspectives that are different from your own, and we ask you just to be present and listen and accepting of those differences that they will share. One of the reasons that we have come up, I should have changed that slide. One of the reasons that we are here, living in Squamish, we have an LNG facility, just like Kitimat. Wood fibre LNG, which is currently under construction. It is scheduled to begin operations in 2027. And as we have been looking at what has been happening in Kitimat and also at LNG facilities around the world, we've been asking some questions around how is flaring and how is the air pollution from these facilities going to impact the communities and the people that live nearby. So wood fibre LNG estimates that flaring during startup will last for 1 month, with intermittent flare events of 3 to 4 days. They estimate that during regular operations, that flaring will only occur 3% of the time, or 262 hours in a year, or 11 days. We think that that is pretty unrealistic based on what we've seen happen in Kitimat LNG, but also at other LNG facilities worldwide. All of the issues that we are witnessing right now in Kitimat are not specific to Kitimat or to LNG Canada. It is something that occurs at all of these LNG facilities. So some of the questions that we're going to ask this evening are, what are the health harms of LNG for people living in the communities near these LNG export facilities? How can we hold industry accountable to higher standards to protect public health? How can we hold the regulator accountable for systematic regulatory failure. There aren't any consequences for LNG Canada exceeding their permit levels. We're not seeing any consequences. There's no accountability. Why is that? So we have reached out to experts and doctors, and one of the experts that we were working with most recently, and that I had the great joy and privilege of coming to Kitimat with Tim Doty, who is a thermographer. He is a consultant for Oilfield Witness, and he is a former regulator for the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. So Tim and I spent a week in Kitimat looking at both the LNG Canada facility and also Rio Tinto. He has a specialized camera that you can see just there. This is a camera that detects the invisible pollution that you can't see with the naked eye. And we have a few videos that we'd like to share of what we witnessed and what we saw at LNG Canada. So one of the first days, we were down by the river. For those of you that may not be familiar with LNG Canada, this is the 120-meter high flare stack, which we're approximately 2 kilometers away from that. So if you look in the sky, you can see there's no black smoke today. There's really nothing. Like it's a clear blue sky. Looking in a little bit closer, you can see that this is really just a pilot flare. It's not the large flare that we have seen light up the night sky here in Kitimat or here in Terrace. I know from talking to many of the locals here that you have been able to see the flare from Terrace. So this is just a small pilot flare. And this is an example of what we can see with the camera. So if you're looking at the flare stack, you can see the flare itself. But what I'm going to show you in this video is all of the pollution that you can't see with the naked eye. And this is what this looks like. I just want to give people a warning. This video does contain flashing lights in the last 30 seconds or so that may potentially trigger seizures for people with photosensitive epilepsy. So I recommend that for this video only, that you only watch the first 30 seconds or so. So as you can see, this is all of the pollution that is completely invisible to the human eye. This is uncombusted and partially combusted hydrocarbons, methane, and volatile organic compounds. And this is traveling straight towards the community of Kitimat and straight towards Terrace. All of our airshed is connected, and depending on how the winds blow, again, from talking to the local people here, we know that it's connected. With this particular high sensitivity mode, what this shows, it just focuses on the movement of the pollution plume. So you can really see that invisible pollution just streaming. And this is with the flare that there's no visible black smoke, there's barely a flame. That is just emissions venting into the atmosphere, pollution. So we got a little bit closer to the facility. This is the main entrance to LNG Canada site, which is a public road. And we took some footage here as well. So this is the flare stack that you can see. You've got the LNG trains in this area. And I want to draw your attention to these stacks. You can't see any pollution coming out of these stacks right now, but I'm going to show you what the camera sees. So again, just another example of this is the flare. So you've got the pollution that's coming off of the flare, but also off of these, there's 5 hot stacks that we saw on this particular day. So these are just 2 of them. So this stack and then another stack here, and you can see the pollution moving off. And we've got a video. So what you're seeing here again is 5 hot stacks And you can see the invisible pollution that is being emitted at LNG Canada, not only from the flare, but also from these 5 hot stacks. And there's another 2 just to the left. The video will pan in just a moment. But there's also some pollution coming from this here. You can see that pouring out. And there's a little bit more being emitted here. So again, this is uncombusted and partially combusted hydrocarbons, methane, and volatile organic compounds. And Dr. Tim Takaro will explain a little bit more about what these pollutants are and the harm that they can cause. So just a little bit to the left now, you can see the other 2 hot stacks. So while we were in Kitimat, LNG Canada was constantly emitting this invisible pollution that you can't see with the naked eye. It was constantly polluting. And in the words of Tim Doty, LNG Canada is a big polluter. So one of the things that we've heard from a lot of people that live in Kitimat is that there's already another polluter in that area, Rio Tinto or Alcan. And you can see, this is Rio Tinto, there's very visible pollution, and so people really focus on that. They can see that pollution with the naked eye, and I just want to show a video right now that compares that visible, very visible pollution with the invisible pollution that's being emitted by LNG Canada. When we were in Kitimat in those 5 days, we were filming constantly from several different locations around the community, looking at both Rio Tinto and LNG Canada. The first 2 days, we didn't see any pollution at all from Rio Tinto. I don't know if the facility was in shutdown that day. I don't know if they weren't operating, if it was just a stage in the process, if they maybe operate in batches. I don't know the answers to that. LNG Canada was constantly emitting pollution all day, every day. So this is a video that shows what we can see, just to compare the 2. So I want you to focus particularly on the right. So this is LNG Canada. And again, you can see the pollution that's being emitted constantly from that facility. And on the left here, this is Rio Tinto, and this is the camera showing that visible plume of pollution as well. All right. So with that, I would like to invite our next speaker up, Dr. Tim Takaro. Dr. Takaro is a physician scientist at SFU, Professor Emeritus in the Faculty of Health Sciences and Planetary Health Lead in the New School of Medicine. He's an active member of the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment. He's father to Annie and Ben and life partner to Aggie, living in gratitude on Quaquet unceded lands. His career began at the University of Washington in occupational and environmental medicine, where he researched the links between human exposures and disease and finding effective public health-based preventative solutions to such risks. His current research program explores the impacts of resource extraction on human health in relationship with our land and waters. With immense gratitude to the First Peoples, he is beginning to use his Indigenous knowledge to relearn environmental health as he tests different interventions in climate action and planet protection. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Tim Takaro. So hold it close to your mouth.
Okay. Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here with you. And I just wanted to note that as an occupational medicine physician, I have studied chemicals a lot and the impacts of chemicals on human health. But in the process, of course, of occupational medicine, you get an understanding too of what the health effects of unemployment are, which are tremendous. And it's important to keep that in perspective. I'm a member of the Physicians for Social Responsibility as well as the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment. And This organization is an education and advocacy organization for public health and environmental health. We focus on a number of issues in addition to the fossil fuel industry, but because of the climate crisis in the past several years, we've focused quite a bit on climate change, and this is a press conference regarding the demand that we have made now with the Health Officers Council of British Columbia and many councils around the province for a cumulative independent health impacts assessment, which is also a demand of many peoples, including here you see Freda Hussein with the Wet'suwet'en. It's an issue that brings us together as physicians, Indigenous peoples, and peoples across the province to improve public health and to address the pollution, both climate pollution and toxic pollution. Our conclusion is this. Just get right to the punchline. Fracking and LNG are harming our health. They're harming our healthcare system. And there are serious impacts, particularly on rural and Indigenous communities. So I started focusing on resource extraction as my research developed into the human health impacts of climate change. And I think all of us here have already seen that the climate emergency is here. So this is a fire from 2022 in Coldstream, BC. But this is also indicative of, I think there are now about 30 fires going in British Columbia and more to come. Why is this? Well, yes, we have not been managing our forests well, but the main driver of wildfire risk now is climate change. What this graph shows is compared with an average temperature in the 1960s. If the color is blue, then it's cooler than that period. If the color is red, it is hotter than that period. And you'll notice at the tail end here, it is getting hotter and hotter every year. This is not something you probably need this graph to tell you, but the average global temperatures are now risen more than 1.5 degrees above the 1960s average. And it's driven by this curve here that you see imposed on the color channel. And that is the carbon dioxide increasing since the industrial age began in the 1860s, when the carbon dioxide level was 285 parts per million, to today's over 430 parts per million. That is what is driving our increase in temperatures and the devastation that comes with those increasing temperatures. Now I'm going to age myself here and point out that I was born at 313 parts per million. So I've experienced most of this increase in my lifetime. I was involved in Environment Canada Climate Change and Health Canada report called The Health of Canadians in a Changing Climate, and published in 2022. And in this we showed that, of course, there are many negative health effects from climate change. The North, I would say, is experiencing this more acutely than many parts of the country because the North is warming faster than most parts of the continent. And I also would note that as these increases are happening, the impacts, of course, on health are increasing. And we are at a crossroads now. We are making choices today which will determine whether or not we bring emissions down, and with that following temperatures down, or whether we increase further. So we are going to overshoot 1.5 degrees, that is clear. We're probably going to overshoot 2 degrees warmer, which is quite devastating to biological systems. But that is nothing like 4.5 to 6 degrees warming, which is the trajectory that we are on. And I will show you how that is calculated in just a moment. A 4.5 to 6 degree warmer world is much more harsh for human health than a 1.5 to 2 degree world. It is literally a matter of life and death in this crossroads that we're at. Many of you will have experienced some of these human costs of climate change: loss of critical ecosystem services, reduction in fisheries, heat domes, flooding, rising insurance costs, reduced food security, dangerous working conditions. I could go on and on all night, but the point is that we're having profound effects on not only human health, but the health of all our ecosystems and animals. We are in the 6th extinction, and we could turn this around. So 2023 was a bad year for wildfires, and that wildfire season contributed to over 70,000 premature deaths in North America and Europe. Europe experienced our wildfire smoke. Most of North America experienced our wildfire smoke. 70,000 excess deaths. So this graph shows where we are. The inflection point is where the blue line takes off. And you can see there, around 2025, that we were targeting a 16% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions for British Columbia. And by 2030, we're supposed to be at 40% reduction. This is according to the Clean BC plan. And at 2040, 60%, 2050, 80% reduction. But instead, we're headed up. We're headed up because we're emitting more and more. LNG Canada Phase 1, wood fiber that's on the books and being built, Cedar LNG also under construction, and the planned Sealisms and LNG Canada Phase 2. So those emissions will further increase temperatures and further increase the ensuing weather disasters. We know how to cut emissions, and we have done this. So as of 2027, we have cut about 2.3 million tons of pollution. But these improved projects would increase climate pollution by 20 million tons. Even with electrification, we'll be increasing climate pollution. And the most profound effect is the effect of emissions from combustion of the product. So we couldn't get this on the slide because 130 million tons compared to 13 million tons doesn't fit. So this ribbon that Kate is taking out is representative of the 130 million tons of carbon pollution, and she's going out the door with it. All the way to the front door. So I want to talk a little bit about flaring and the toxic effects of flaring. So flaring is burning off the excess gas. It's a required safety feature of the facility. You don't want the gas to be contained and cause an explosion of the facility. So you flare it, and it's something that happens throughout the process, startup, facility maintenance, and normal operations. LNG Canada has 5 polluting flares. These names are not so important, but they reflect different ends of the process. So warm, wet at the beginning of the process, cold, dry at the end of the process when the compressors and all have cooled the gas to very, very low temperatures. The acid gas incinerator is a method for cleaning the gas somewhat. And there's a storage and loading flare, and also the spare flare or emergency flare. And when LNG Canada was given its environmental assessment, the rates of flaring that were to be allowed were described. And what was not mentioned was the fact that during startup, this flaring is higher than during routine operations. And the impression given from the environmental assessment is that, well, it's a short period, it's not very important, and we're going to base this environmental assessment on the routine operations. But more recently, as we're getting close to 2 years of startup flaring, we're hearing that, well, when you start up, you always get more flaring. And that was always in the permits and in our discussions. We can talk about this more in the discussion period, but this is disingenuous at best. Also in this assessment, there was an amendment in 2023 where it was noted that, in fact, at the concentrations expected, in this case of sulfur dioxide, that residents with asthma or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, that's COPD, will experience respiratory effects. And in fact, that seems to be what we're facing. The other point I just want to make on this is that the guidelines in this assessment were and are outdated. We now have more strict guidelines. The 2025 Canadian Air Quality Guidelines are more protective, but we're operating under the old guidelines. So I've been involved in several research projects. This is one of the more spatially interesting insofar as we were able to use satellite imagery of all the LNG facilities around the world, about 64 facilities. And we were able to use the satellite data for many of them to estimate with this imagery how much flaring is happening during the startup period and how much flaring is happening during the routine operation period. And we found that there's 3 times more emissions during the startup period than during the routine operations. Yet the permitting is about the routine operations. This is my colleague, Dr. Laura Monet, who's an assistant professor at the University of Victoria's Clean Air Lab. And looking at this information and also examining the documents from wood fiber LNG and LNG Canada, and more recently the CLISMs, our real world analysis shows that the startup flaring is among the highest emission phase of the LNG's life cycle, and it can last up to 2 years. You'll recall from Tracy's introduction that wood fiber has said their startup flaring will be 4 weeks. And maybe we should take some wagers on that. She's not going to bet any money. I have a bridge that I might be able to sell you in Brooklyn. Startup emissions at the BC LNG plants have been systematically underestimated. And this has led us to conclude that the BC's risk assessments are inadequate and fail to fully protect public health. So what's going on here? Why is this? It's really these pollutants are the main bad actors. Nitrogen oxides are potent oxidizing agents that irritate your lungs and mucous membranes, your eyes, any of those sensitive membranes that protect our bodies. They also will contribute to airways disease and heart disease. And sulfur oxides operate in very similar ways. The other problem aspect of these pollutants is when they're combined with water, they produce acid. And so you get the acid effects also are deleterious to our cells and to a lot of life on the planet. You've heard of acid rain, perhaps, which was an East Coast phenomenon coming from coal-fired plants primarily. We have it too. Another important pollutant is called particulate matter. It's what it sounds like, particles. But these are particularly small particles, 2.5 microns, that is very small, like the width of a human hair. And these can get deep into your lungs. And from that inflammatory effect in your lungs, cause both chronic obstructive pulmonary disease as well as asthma, but contribute to cardiovascular disease as well. So a strong risk factor for heart disease. Benzene is the first chemical ever classified as a carcinogen. And it is a prominent contaminant from these flares. There is no safe level of benzene. You won't find any studies that show a level of benzene that causes no harm. There are many other carcinogens emitted in this grand category of polyaromatic hydrocarbons, volatile organic compounds. Many of them are carcinogenic. This is an interesting chart. So you see a bunch of cities along the bottom there. And you'll notice the cities on the right-hand side have very low levels of benzene. This is in parts per billion. And as you go along here, it's rising. And look who is number one. Vancouver's gas was the highest containing benzene gas in this study. The measurements were made in people's kitchens. So this is measuring the impact of the gas stove producing benzene, because when you burn gas, that's one of the contaminants. So measuring in people's homes, we're getting these levels of benzene, and the Montney shale gas is the worst that was measured in North America. I want to give a shout out to the Kitimat Airshed group. This is a group of citizens, government, industry, who have come together to work on Kitimat air quality. And this is a map of Kitimat showing the showing the LNG Canada site and the Rio Tinto site in red. And these stations of air quality monitors. So I want to point out a few things about these. It looks like there's a lot going on here. It looks like there are many things being measured. But if you break it down a little bit, you'll notice that, so for one of these, the carcinogens and the polyaromatic hydrocarbons are not measured continuously. And in fact, I just looked the last month, and there were no measurements of polyaromatic hydrocarbons at the Hull Road, nor at Whitesell. So, and some of these are things that come from Environment Climate Change Canada, the meteorologic weather data, and the air quality index are not really part of the monitoring system here, but they're added on to the graph. And I want to point out that these stationary monitoring stations are not the whole story. An airshed like Kitimat's and also Terrace is not heterogeneous. In other words, it's not all the same everywhere all the time. There are hotspots, we call them, where pollutants maybe bump up against a mountain or are heated in a part of the city that's particularly warm because of urban heat island. And so getting the actual exposure that you and I might have living our everyday lives is very challenging. And you need not just stationary monitors, but also it helps to have many, many monitors around. And one of the ways of approaching this is with this roaming air monitoring vehicle, which measures many pollutants, and it measures in different places around an area. And you can see in this map that that green line is where the roving air monitoring has happened, and the little pins are where the measurements are taken. And this is all good, but it is not used that much. It was used in 2024 from May to November, and it was used for a short time in 2025. And I have this data from that period. This is just benzene, and as you'll recall, this is a very potent carcinogen with no safe level. So this large spike was before LNG Canada, so this is presumably Rio Tinto. But this one is actually more concerning because it's sustained over a longer period of time and was after LNG Canada started. But the most concerning thing, but that is very concerning, of course, that there are these carcinogen exposures. But it's also very concerning that during the time that the roving air monitor is in the community, all that red period that you see on top, they're not doing measurements. It's equipment is not working, or the technician can't get it to go right. So actually the bulk of the time there's no measurement being made. So the startup at LNG Canada began in August 29th, 2024, and we're coming up on 2 years. And these events occur for days and sometimes weeks at a time. Kitimat residents in February and March were notified 33 days of flaring, and this was during regular operations. So there's a lot of language flying around about what is routine and what is non-routine. Regular operations, it means routine, but most of the flaring in the last several months has been non-routine. And there are various reasons for this. Well, we know that there is much more volume of gas being flared than what was authorized. And this has been reported widely in the press. During a 4-month period in October to January 2026, just the warm wet flare exceeded the volumes that were permitted by 45 times on average, and the cold dry flare by 40 times, the storage and loading by 5 times. So these are very, very large volumes over permit. I did want to note that sort of a claim to fame in a very macabre way. The malfunctioning LNG Canada terminal burned more gas in the past year, 2025, than the world record of 2024. So not a distinguished achievement. The BC energy regulator did finally determine non-compliance a few weeks ago. And this was based on the black smoke measurements. And the penalty, if you will, was to write a report and have this report by August 15th. And by October 15th, you have to do something. Why is this going on? There have been equipment problems. And this was noted many, many months ago when the volume of flaring began to go up. It was September of last year, so almost a year ago. And it was to prevent something called backburn, which is a very dangerous situation where it is what it sounds like. Instead of burning up, it burns down into the facility. Catastrophic risk. So in order to prevent backburn, they had to push more gas out the flare. And that, of course, raised the temperature of the flare tip. And because of that, months and months of ongoing high flaring, a crack developed in the flare tip, which was noted on February 18th, followed by another crack a few days later. And because of that, they had to turn off the warm wet flare, which was the major flare, and flare through the emergency flare or spare flare. And this flare is not on the permit. You can flare an unlimited amount out of that flare. I would also note that the cold, dry, and storage loading flares all exceeded the LNG permits during this period. So another problem they had in March was with the acid gas incinerator. I think I mentioned earlier that the acid gas incinerator is a way of removing some of the sulfur dioxides and also hydrogen sulfide, which is a poisonous gas. To remove some of that anyway from the gas stream, the incinerator went down for a month for maintenance periods. And because of that, we had more dirty gas being burned. And some of you, if you've traveled to Kitimat, may have gotten to see this double flare. The double flare occurs when you're flaring from the main stack, and you have to use the emergency flare also. Fortunately, we believe this is going to be remediated soon. They have the new flare tip. But the problem of the backburn may take up to 3 years to correct. So there's nothing to say that with that large volume of flare happening, that the flare tip won't crack and have to be replaced again. So serious problems. Why are these serious? Because they contribute to human health risk. And these are the primary human health risks that we are concerned about. I've mentioned asthma before. So asthma is a constriction of the airways that makes it difficult to breathe, that you can't get air in. And that's why you'll see people with asthma using what's called a bronchodilator to expand those airways and give them a chance to breathe. But sometimes those medicines don't work. And particularly when pollution is very bad, when you have a combined pollution, say for wildfire smoke, in addition to this kind of pollution, asthma is very difficult to treat. Heart attacks, I've mentioned, also increase during particulate pollution events, and that's because of the inflammation of the blood vessels that could provide blood for the heart. And so additional impacts when you have particulate air pollution. There is an association preterm birth with the exposures, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, particulate matter, and as I mentioned, certain cancers, particularly childhood leukemia is associated with benzene, and we have noted that there is higher childhood leukemia rates around fracking fields, for example, which also are emitting benzene. And then finally, just in general, there is early mortality from people living near these facilities. This has been examined in a financial way. You can count on the Americans to be following the money. And U.S. LNG export terminals in Louisiana have been linked to over $1 billion in healthcare costs in a single year. It's not just in the States, of course. The Australian Impex plant was systematically underestimating its exposures, and in fact, they reported just 4 tons of benzene emissions, but then a few months later had to revise that to 500 tons, of 13,000% increase. So I mentioned birth outcomes and low birth weight. We are finding that in U.S. studies of flare communities, that living within 5 kilometers of a single flare that flares 10 days out of a year increased the premature birth rate by 50%. And you'll see here a shot of Kitimat and the 5 kilometer radius there, including the Heisler village and most of the residential area of Kitimat. So as I've mentioned, we're not looking at these events in isolation because, of course, they aren't isolated. In the case of Kitimat, you have Rio Tinto right next door, also a polluting industry. You have all the traffic pollution, you have all the marine pollution, and on those bad days in the summertime, you have wildfire pollution. So it all adds up. And that is really why we are so worried about the health costs of BC LNG. Because these airsheds are not pure to begin with. We're not going to be able to do much about particulate matter from fires. Fires are going to happen. And as we warm the planet, fires are going to happen more. So we need to think about this industry in the context of what kind of planet we're giving to future generations and to our own health. So I just want you to consider about the whole chain of harm, as I call it. The Prime Minister will call this the value chain. I'm calling it the chain of harm. And it starts with fracking in the Northeast, where we have shown that living near fracking wells increases poor birth outcomes, increases asthma risk, through to the pipelines that have their own inherent risks, leak methane, and are subject to explosion risk, have compressor stations that emit nitrogen dioxides, through to the liquefaction, which is mostly what we talked about today at the LNG Canada plant, through to the shipping, where these large ships are leaking methane, one of the most potent greenhouse gases we know. And then finally to the consumer, where not only are you getting the harms of burning it in your home, but you're getting the harms to the planet and the ecosystems that support all of us. So this is why the BC Health Officers Council has called for a cumulative and comprehensive independent health impacts assessment of the BC gas industry, from the fracking fields through the transport to the liquefaction to the shipping to the scope 3 emissions that we call the greenhouse gas emissions. All of that needs to be considered as we embark on these new facilities. Because until you look at it in a comprehensive way, you're stuck with these little piecemeal approaches. And when I say piecemeal, I really mean it. When you're getting a fracking well started, you don't even need a permit. One well, no problem. And then a few months later, there's another well. No problem. And then a few months later, it's a dozen wells. And you can have a 24-well drill pad over a course of 2 years with no permitting. So that's why we're calling for this independent assessment. And I'm really happy that we have here a city council that has been listening to doctors in the community, like Mary Lynn Barraza, who have said, yes, we want to protect our community. We need to know what is going on here. We support the Health Officers Council of BC, Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment, Canadian Association of Nurses for the Environment, Lexa Firekeepers, who are all asking for a cumulative, comprehensive, independent health impacts assessment. So I just want to thank the Terrace City Council for that action, and we're looking forward to a response from the government. With that, I'll turn it back over to Tracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. I'd like to welcome Grace Vickers and Drew Harris from the Acute Firekeepers. Please join me in welcoming them.
Simgiget, Sigadam Hana, Gilbaweltsek, Denise, Sakadze, Skyze, Grace Diwayu, Hiltzik, Ada Gitkatla, Andrea Vickers, Ma'a, Ada Lupskig, Niguadi. Hi. My name is Grace Vickers. I'm Killer Whale from Hiltzik Nation, but on my father's side, I come from the old village of Gitkatla, and I'm really grateful to be here today. I know both Drew and I grew up playing basketball, soccer, volleyball, so we've been down in this neck of the woods a few times, and yeah, just feeling really grateful to be here. Obviously, it's for a bit of a different reason today, but we kind of came up here and wanted to give our introductions and wanted to thank you all for coming, so I'll pass it off to Drew.
Hati Saizoze, my name is Drew Harris. I come from the Lexiliu Ganethlaya, which is the Wet'suwet'en Nation. I belong to the Small Frog clan in the House of Many Eyes, and I've grown up on my father's territory. He's Gitsan. He's from the village of Unspeak, which is Kispiaks, and I've been lucky to grow up in Higglegit on the territory for pretty much my whole life. And other than when I went to school, I went to UBC and got my degree in psychology and Indigenous studies, but after I graduated, I quickly realized I need to do more to treat these symptoms that I've been seeing in my community. There's lots of harm, there's lots of illness, there's lots of trauma, and I realized that I can't treat that within the Western psychology field, which is where I ended up here today, because I knew we are a direct relation to our environment. So if we're constantly poisoning our environment, we're going to feel those impacts too. And that's why me and Grace are here to share with you guys a little bit about our group and what we've been doing. So yeah, we are the Acute Firekeepers. We're a youth group that formed in August 2024, and we first responded in a response to the Prince Rupert gas transmission pipeline being brought back to life after we thought we kicked it out of town 10 years ago. And I was actually part of the fight 10 years ago before I even knew. I was working with my friend up at the Maddie Lee camp, which is still the longest running Gitsan blockade, and we were helping turn away the PRGT guys that I didn't even know. And here I am still doing that. So it kind of sucks that we still have to do this. But yeah, that's where it started. And we're a youth group that's open to anyone in the area that's 35 and under. We just really wanted to connect youth because we saw this project coming and we saw all the scary things happening around the world with the rising temperatures, wildfires taking over. In my last year of university, it was in the 2023 when I was going back to school where there was a wildfire that almost got super close to my university. And I was like, damn, is my university going to burn down? My house is pretty close to the evacuation. So it was really nerve-wracking. And that's what went into my final year, and I realized it's not the field for me because it's not going to help these problems. So we got together and held an impact meeting for our community because we were getting told lots of misinformation or downplaying of these impacts, and we wanted to give truth to our community because that's what they deserve. So we got together and shared all these different health impacts. And one of the things that stood out most to me, Grace, was the health impacts, which is why we started working with CAPE and all these amazing people that are sharing this good information for us.
So in putting these slides together, the one thing that kept coming up to my brain was our health. I was trying to find a title for it. And I wanted to clarify that when I say our health, I'm not just talking about myself and Drew. I'm talking about every individual in this room today, but I'm also talking about the people who aren't in this room. That could be our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. And in putting this together, a lot of it just came for what we're deciding to leave behind us. And the decisions we make today are extremely important for who's going to be living in the future, for what we want to leave behind us. I'm not sure if there's any readers in the room, but if anyone's ever read, let's say, like Atomic Habits, we can understand that even just small decisions we make today make everlasting impacts when it's what we choose to embody and what we choose to believe, because that gets passed down to our children and the next generation. Drew went in a little bit on our backstory and how we came to be. It's been an honor and a privilege to work with so many individuals that are extremely educated in their field. It's been a privilege to work alongside Drew and other members of the Lafayette Firekeepers. I think the biggest thing that I see is just how strong the younger generation is and how much they're taking on because of decisions that weren't properly executed in the past. We're seeing just the transition from decisions that weren't properly dealt with being passed on to future generations. And what Drew and I are seeing now is that, well, it's our job to pick that up and do our best for our time here to be able to make decisions not just for us, but all other relatives on Earth. Like, we can understand that the plants, the animals, everything living on this earth is connected to us. And that's what we wanted to ground our talk today in. Just running home that environmental health is absolutely not separate from our health. We are not in balance when our emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual are not in balance. And each living thing is a relative on Earth. On our totem poles, our crests, we learn everything from animals. That's how we got all of our teachings, was from watching and seeing all of our counterparts, all of our relatives. So it's also our job to make sure that they're protected. It's not just what impacts us, it's what impacts our fish, our birds, everything that have lived on this earth longer than we have. So that kind of goes into our next portion, which I'll let Drew take over, and it's how we are in relation to the land. And I think she's perfect for that with her degree in psychology and the work she's been doing in community as well.
So yeah, all of the amazing teachings we've been learning, and my mom's always told me this, but I've always just shrugged it off, and now I get it now. Everything is connected. We are part of the land. The same air that we breathe is the same air that all the animals are breathing. The plants that we eat, we're all coming from the same air, water, and soil that we need to survive. And with all the changes heading our way, it's so important to have healthy and thriving lands and ecosystems to take care of us. Especially with the climate chaos and disasters, it comes with a lot of anxiety and grief and worry. And just having healthy spaces to go to that are green and open and not impacted by heavy industrial development is so important for your well-being. And we've found that to be so grounding and helpful for us as a really concerned generation, inheriting these really massive problems that we didn't really have a say in. And now we're trying to use our voice so that we can help make better decisions for the future. But we need our land to help us keep grounded. We need our clean air to keep us healthy. And we need water to keep us healthy, yeah. But reconnecting with the nature and our culture and other peers within our group has been so healing and creating a sense of belonging for everyone. And when you are outside on the land, you connect to it and you start to see what's out there. You don't just see, as Chelsea Armstrong says, just a big green wall when you don't know what's out there. And once you start to learn, you're like, oh, hey, that's arnica, or you just learn all the plants and medicines and you see it everywhere you go. And once you learn that, you just can't understand how you could risk all of that through developments like pipelines that are so destructive.
So I recently just got back. I was away at university completing my double major in political science and Indigenous studies. And I think a lot of my professors were actually really happy to see me go. I took a philosophy class on ethics, and in that class, the first thing we learned was, what is a belief? And my biggest takeaway from that class was, you can't say that you truly have a genuine belief if you have not questioned it and argued it and learned where that belief came from. And I think today a lot of people can kind of get irritated when you start asking questions and you're not just listening. And yes, listening is important, but being able to understand and ask questions is extremely imperative to that. And in my last year, I spent most of my time writing a paper on the development of LNG infrastructure impacts on human health thresholds, but I tailored it a bit more to our mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical well-being. I could stand here and tell you all 10,000 words of that paper, or I could simplify it into what my 2 takeaways are. And I think the biggest thing is, I'm sure most of you have heard, the World Health Organization. They're an agency from the United Nations. They basically set our baseline goals for what other countries can hope to achieve, or set a baseline for our health modules. They wrote a paper in 2021 outlining human health in relation to air quality and pollution. These were the 2 things that rang true. 1, poor air quality is most often associated with marginalized communities. Shocker, environmental racism is a very real thing. And 2, air pollution is the highest threat to human health, resulting in higher rates of death and disease. Reading that document, it definitely hits home. Being from a small town, I grew up on the Gitsan-Lachiep for the majority of my life. I grew up right on the Skeena River, or Wisien, some of you might know it. And I think reading through these documents was really damaging, because it just really rang home how much work we still have left to do. And I think it's just a very basic idea that we can't survive without clean air, so why are we not making decisions that are investing in renewable energy? Which is another huge thing, is the LNG sector is set to decline after the next 25, 30 years, but LNG only needs 20 years of longevity to run home for their assessments. But you know why we're going to be hitting a permanent decline? It's because this isn't sustainable. We are not leaving behind a sustainable model for future generations to be able to survive off of. So there's going to be no market, because every country is going to be forced to invest in renewable energy. And this isn't a far off idea. There's a lot of communities currently that are making strides to make renewable energy something that their community is doing. You can see that in Sikadach. They're moving towards solar energy, food sovereignty, modules where their community can be self-sufficient and not reliant on government for outside funding when it comes to LNG. So I'm going to pass it off to Drew to say a little bit more on Indigenous communities.
So yeah, like Grace is saying, this isn't new. Environmental racism has been a part of since Canada first started. We could see the RCMP was created to deal with the Indian problem, and they're still dealing with us. We could see all the different impacts across Canada, grassy narrows being one of the most devastating cases. They had mercury poisoning, and they're still dealing with the impacts today, and they're still not getting compensated for the health decline that they've been facing as a community and a nation. Another one that's recent was the CGL pipeline. I'm at Sotin, and I was in school while that happened, and I just remember being so heartbroken watching all of that unfold from a phone in my dorm. So I knew this time I had to do more to help. But these all have devastating impacts, and the people that pay the biggest price is Indigenous people, or people of color, or minorities. And this is why it's so important to bring up these injustices and name them. Lots of the impacts we've heard in like the environmental side is just about the land and the health of the waters and the fish. But these all impact everything. They impact humans, they impact our social life, they impact our spirituality, our cultural connection. These disrupt all of these things, not just the environment. So some of the socioeconomic impacts from LNG and the man camps are one of the biggest ones that we've felt is the conflict and division within communities. Since we've started speaking up against LNG, we've been met with some lateral violence within our community because these industries strategically pin us against each other because they can't, if we're too busy fighting against one another, we don't fight the actual problem, which are these very few elite imperialist people that are controlling all of these industries on a global scale. So these have really big impacts on our tight-knit communities where these people never even step foot. They have impacts on our harvesting. We have loss of habitat. We lose berry patches. We lose medicinal patches. We lose our old ancestral village sites and our old growth forests. We don't have many of those left. And we lose a lot of cultural history and just animal habitat, so less food. If you rely on the land for hunting, medicine, plants, these are all very impacting on your livelihood.
So when we're talking about community impacts, there are numerous, like even just going off what Drew said when it comes to socioeconomic impacts. I live right around the village of Unspayach, and there's 2 proposed man camps that are going to be going up valley. If you've ever been to Kispiox, if you like to fish, if you like the waters, if you like Pence Lake, Kispiox Valley Rodeo, you've been out that way, you know it's a fairly small town. So when we're trying to conceptualize the amount of people coming into that town, specifically workers not from the area, I know a lot of the time the LNG will pin it as we're going to be hiring locally, but a lot of the times, if you've been to the Terrace airport, you see that a lot of the workers are actually coming from outside the town. So this is bringing people into community that they don't have relationship to, they don't have history to, they're not sure who their neighbor is, they're not sure the traditional title holders of the territories. And I think this is a huge thing we need to understand, but also it's common knowledge to understand that when your population is doubling, there are going to be a lot of socioeconomic impacts. There's going to be impacts to Indigenous women and our safety of children. Indigenous women are disproportionately impacted by violence compared to our non-Indigenous counterparts. So what's going to be happening when we're out on the territory harvesting and we're met with industry trucks, when all of the land is being carved open and now public lands are coming available for more hunting of moose and elk that are now driving out our moose populations. I was sitting over at that table and I looked over and I was like, look, he's looking down on us right now, making sure we're making the right decisions. He's got big glass on us right now, watching us and what we're talking about. But these are all things that we need to be taking into consideration when we're looking at bringing this many people into community. The impacts far extend just sexual violence and harmful violence towards women. There's also at-risk impacts of increase of drugs and alcohol coming through community. A lot of people are vulnerable. There's a lot of intergenerational trauma, and we're at a very pivotal point where we're hitting a point of healing. And this is really shown through the work that we're doing with the keepers and going out on the territory, bringing youth out onto the territory. We're at a part where we're trying to revitalize everything, and the decisions we make right now are extremely crucial to that development. As we said, there's going to be a lot of streams impacted. There's over 1,000 river, streams, and creek crossings that the Prince Rupert Gas Transmission Pipeline will cross. A lot of these are fish-bearing. They'll actually be going right across the Skeena River, just around the bend up from the confluence. So I think, how can we be operating on a 10-year-old environmental assessment certificate? It's just a question that we have to ask. And if you remember what I said earlier, it's really freaking important that we question the decisions being made, because everything that's set out in law is brought by people. We don't make policy, we are the ones that create it. We are the ones telling government what we want, and that's how it becomes a creation. Otherwise, they're just going to keep doing what they want to do. But when we question what they're doing, that's how we have our rights. That's how everything has been fought for. And there's a lot of confliction right now when it comes to the judiciary and our legislatures. This is extremely blatant in common law, but that's our opportunity to go in and make our voices heard. Litigation is always an option if you're feeling lost or like there isn't a solution, but winning isn't always the priority. A lot of the times it's going in and it's deterring investors from coming in and looking at our community as a meal. A lot of the people set out to benefit from pipelines aren't from the area. They're foreign investors, they're overseas. If you were at the recent PRGT meeting they held online today, it was blatant. They said the majority of their shareholders were from Asian markets overseas. So why are we selling our resources to anyone but ourselves? They can put a price tag on everything that's below our land, but I can't put a price tag on the trees, the animals, our air, and our clean water, because that's how we live, that's how we're here today, and that's how our future generations are going to be able to live, and I'm not willing to sell that for them. With that being said, it's not all doom and gloom. I'm not going to stand up here and fearmonger you like a politician. We have a voice and we have a future, and I'll leave it to Drew to share some things that we've been doing to go out and connect with the land and just focus on our culture and revitalizing and saying that we're still here and we're still doing these things and we're not for sale.
So yeah, lots of the problems we're facing, we've been talking and discussing, what do we do? What do we do? Everyone's been telling us advice and what we should do. One of the biggest things we heard was don't burn out. This field and protecting the environment leads to lots of burnout because it's a passionate job. You're doing something you care and love about, and it's hard to turn it off. But we knew we had to do things differently because we could see that what's going on isn't working. We aren't getting the changes we need. We're not seeing the results we need to have a healthy future. So what do? We've been looking at revitalizing culture, and connection has been the most beneficial and healing thing for many of us in the Lekyip Firekeepers. Just really focusing on knowledge and skill transfer and building connections with youth and other people in the community, with knowledge holders, with educators, with people in different fields, just to learn more and share our experiences. So some of the stuff we've been doing is knowledge and skill transfers and lots of training. We've been looking at all these problems like wildfires. These things are really scary. So what can we do to help bring our own safety up? So we've been getting trained in swiftwater rescue. We live by lots of rivers, and we're like, damn, most of us actually haven't learned any of this river safety. And it's been really helpful and empowering for us to learn how to be safe on the river with ourselves and with one another. As we bring youth out, that's really important that we want them to be safe. So we've been doing that. We've been doing wilderness first aid training so that we can help each other out in case there's ever an emergency when you're out in the middle of the bush because you're pretty far away from help. We've been doing culture fires, which has been one of the most amazing and fun things that we've been bringing back. In the last year, we've been training so that we can get out on the fire line on ourselves, and we did our first burn this year in April. And we've been doing it on our traditional territories with the WILPs, the traditional house groups. So we've been really focusing on bringing back our old stewardship practices. And the fire helps with so many different things. As we heard earlier, the wildfire smoke is a huge concern for human health and air pollution. And the culture fires are controlled burns, so they are burning the fuel load that has been building up over the last 100 years since culture fires have been banned. So we're reducing that load in a controlled, safe way. We're also creating more habitat for animals so that they can eat better. We're also opening up the forest canopies so that shrubs can grow, so you get more food plants like berries. And all these things impact and have positive benefits. So these are the type of things that we're focusing on. And as we're doing this, we're learning the language, we're learning the history of the land, we're learning the names of the plants and our old teachings that we have lost. And we're also getting youth outside, we're getting our elders outside, we're getting our parents, we're getting our family. And it's just really fun to have all these different generations coming together and learning together. We've been learning how to do archaeological surveying, as we've seen with CGL. They said there was no cultural significance on the route, so that was okay for them to go through there and clear it all. So we're learning now that we have to do it beforehand so that we have proof that we have history here, and that's what we're doing. We're taking soil samples. If you look in the soil, you can see the history of fire that our people have been doing for thousands of years. You can see how healthy the soil is compared to other places where there wasn't any human interaction. We've been doing water sampling, monitoring the water, because there's so many streams that this PRGT pipeline will cross, and it's just so much work that we've been doing to keep track of all of this, because it's really easy to lose track when it's so complicated and divided into all these different sections. And just advocacy initiatives. Me and Grace and a few other firekeepers have been busy touring around and spreading awareness about all these different issues that we're facing. And yeah, the biggest one is just connecting youth. We have about 30 core members in our youth group and probably around 60 to 70 in the wider group that we come together and help each other. And it's just a really great place of support and finding hope and solutions forward that are solution-based, not reactive, more proactive.
I just wanted to emphasize a little bit on the building relationships. I think this is one thing that's really important to keep in mind, is that it's so important to just be kind to one another. Economic reconciliation is probably one of my most favorite things to talk about, solely because I dislike it so much. But I think it's really important for us to be kind to other individuals. You never know what someone's doing, and at the end of the day, people are just trying to make decisions that are going to positively impact themselves, their family. So if someone's struggling and you have a carrot dangling in front of your face, I'm never going to judge someone for doing what's best for their family. But with that, that means that my beliefs that we have to argue, fight for, and understand, we're still going to go after them. And I think at the end of the day, as long as we have common goals, being protecting, living a positive and a good life and walking softly, then we can move forward. But I just wanted to run that home. I know a lot of us probably have family, friends that work in industry. My brother works in camps. He's got to make a living for himself. There's a lot of intersectionality in this, and like Drew said, you can't let the lateral violence be at the focal point of all of it. You have to remember the systems that are set in place that make us argue with one another, and we have to look at government and the structures that have been created. And I think it's also really important, once again, I'm going to run it home, to question them. So with that, the last little thing that you can do, because we spoke on everything we're doing, but one thing that you can do right now is sign our petitions. We'll let you guys pull out your phones and take some photos. You can take a photo of this, scan the QR code with your phone, and share your concerns. You can share this with your local leaders, your houses, your family. But we really encourage you guys to fill us out, because your voice really matters. We need to hear from community. I'm loving all the phones I'm seeing right now. Thank you. I'm watching all you guys. But other than that, I think if Drew doesn't have anything else to say, no, she does. Okay. Always.
Yeah. I just want to say thank you guys all for coming out. It means a lot to know that we have people coming and listening and having open heart and open ears to what we're sharing, because this is important, and we're just telling the truth. That's all we have is the truth. And thank you all.
Do I exit, Neeson?
Thank you, Drew and Grace. I've heard Drew and Grace speak now. This is the third time, and every time I walk away in awe. It gives me so much hope to know that, I mean, these youth are incredible with what they're doing right now. You're already leaders, and I look forward to the future where you are the decision makers, and you are the ones that are choosing a better future for all of us. I just want to follow up on a couple of things that were said. It is really important to understand the reason that we're here is to connect community. And so coming from Squamish, where we have an LNG facility, part of the intention of being here in Terrace and being in Kitimat and being in Hazelton, being in Vancouver, this is the 5th event that we've had, the first was in Squamish, is really to connect the communities with all of the information that we have learned, but also to hear from the communities that also have knowledge that we want to learn. So sharing information, connecting with each other is really one of the key reasons that we're here. And I wanted to follow up on another thing that Drew and Grace said. It's really important to understand that we aren't trying to judge anybody, or we understand that a lot of the communities here are reliant on these industries. And we understand that. My uncle worked in the oil and gas industry. My brother works in mining. We understand what it means for these communities to be able to have a good, reliable paycheck to feed their families. And so we're not coming here with judgment, but with a shared plea for understanding as we try to tackle these really big challenges that our communities are collectively facing, and to really target industry who should be doing a lot better, not only to protect the people in the communities, but to protect their workers. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to Ankur Patel. Ankur is an acute care nurse in Kitimat, located on the traditional territory of the Haisla peoples. Receiving his education in rural northwest BC and providing care in the region provides him with insight as a local healthcare provider in an LNG-facing community. He has also served the field of nursing nationally and internationally via his tenure on the board of the Canadian Nurses Association, current positions supporting the International Council of Nurses, and as an active member of the Canadian Association of Nurses for the Environment. Please join me in welcoming Ankur.
Thank you for the wonderful introduction, Tracy. So my name is Ankur Patel, and I'm a registered nurse in Kitimat. And before I start, I really want to thank you all for being here today. The only reason I'm a nurse in Kitimat is because I was educated in Terrace. I went to Coast Mountain. I went to UNBC, where I graduated from. And it's so important that I'm back here today and that you're all attending, because this is an issue that impacts both our communities. We need to work together, talk, stand together in discussing how we can change, how can we adapt, and how will this industry be impacting us all. So I'm a registered nurse, and I'm also a member of the Canadian Association of Nurses for the Environment. And what you might not know about nursing is that it's written within our ethical framework, actually written in there to advocate for the needs of our patients and the need for the saving the environmental determinants that protects our health, that protects our patients, and allows us to live in the conditions that we do and we have since time immemorial. So this image was, in conjunction with CAPE. This was at that CAPE event we had a few months ago. We work alongside our physician colleagues and our Indigenous land protectors in sharing some of the impacts that we're seeing on our patients and our communities. So this was another similar forum in Smithers discussing the impacts of the LNG industry. This one here is of our president, Emily Tremblay, at the House of Commons, alongside her physician colleagues, discussing the importance of restricting misleading fossil fuel advertising. That's a bit of the scope that we work with. Now, before I get into discussions about industry, I want to talk about your healthcare. I want to talk about what's impacting the care that you deserve as Canadian residents. What will be there on your worst days, on your family's worst days, on your friends' worst days? What is the safety net for you as community members? This is a picture that members of CANE see, but it's quite important for everyone to understand where we're at. And to start, I want to talk about nursing, because nurses, we constitute the largest portion of the healthcare workforce. So when there's shifts in the systems that affect nurses, this changes the course of the healthcare system as a whole. So this is the basis that we're working from. Right now, we know that we have thousands of nurses across this province, but we are short thousands of nurses as well. Our hospitals are understaffed, and we're seeing this especially in the north. Our health authorities and our rural sites, we run on travel nurses, agency contracts, and mandatory overtime to keep functioning. Think about this. When your nurse is tired and they're mandated to stay overtime over their 12-hour shift to keep on working to meet your healthcare needs, what does that mean for you? What does that mean for your family member who's in the hospital? What does that mean for, the reason that you're visiting our emergency sites, right? Now, something else we're seeing is a change in safety. In a very highly feminized profession, we're seeing escalating amounts of physical and verbal violence. Every single one of my colleagues, and even myself, I've experienced physical and verbal violence in the workplace. And this makes you think you're already having a strained profession. Now, those who are there feel unsafe at work. They feel scared to come into work. And really, what does this mean? This means burnout and attrition of your largest workforce. We know, our statistics show that we are not replacing our nurses at the rate that we need to be. We are losing our nurses on the whole part. So that's the nursing picture. It's concerning. And what I want you to think is just to be curious. What does this mean for your healthcare outcomes? What does this mean for your families on some of your worst days? And, we know what a lot of these policy decisions lead to. This leads to higher wait times. We're seeing 8 to 12-hour wait times in our emergency care. We're seeing, you're waiting in waiting rooms, ambulances, hallways, right? We're also seeing surgical backlogs. Think of the parent who needed a new knee or a new hip, a new shoulder. These surgical procedures are being pushed back months and sometimes even years. So this is what it means for your healthcare. We're also seeing ER and service closure. We're seeing this across the north. We do not have the staff to maintain baseline staffing. This means that your ERs are being shut down. When you need to access your safety net the most, you have to leave town, you have to go elsewhere, you have to access care in other regions. And this just means poorer outcomes. When you look at the quality of care, what happens here? When you don't have enough nurses to meet how many patients you need to see, this means lower quality of care. This is missed assessments, missed medications, wrong medications, falls, hospital-acquired infections. This might be a missed stroke, a missed heart attack, a missed sepsis. This is a concerning picture that we're seeing in healthcare right now. So I want you to think, on your worst day, do you feel comfortable in the system as is, right? And this is a question to think about. And now let's add another variable into the mix, the LNG industry. As Tim has already so clearly stated for us, we know that this industry has health impacts for us. We know what it does to our most vulnerable populations. These are the elderly, the pregnant, those who are carrying a child in utero. They're not compliant. They don't adapt to these risks, and this could affect a lot of part of a person's functioning. We think of our older population as well, those who have respiratory and immune systems that are less compliant to changes in the systems around them. How will this affect them? And again, what is the end result? What is the question we're left with? What does this do to your healthcare system? One that is under such immense strain already. I want you to sit with that a little bit when you think of the LNG industry. Now, let me shift gears a little bit. So I'm a resident of Kitimat. I'm, one of your neighbors. And, I've had the pleasure of living in Terrace for the past 4 years for my education. But I want to help you kind of understand what it's like being in Kitimat right now. What is it like being a Kitimat resident? So we're going to do a quick thought experiment. I want you to see if you can tell the difference between these two photos I show you. So this one I took from downtown. It's a wonderful photo. You can see that it's a little gloomy here. It's nice. It's right across from the library. But when you look at this one, what do you see? Do you see a tree on fire? What's going on there? Interesting. Here, let's try this one. This one is a photo I took on Heisel Hill. I think it's one of the most beautiful images of our community. You can see our wonderful town nestled into the corner, our beautiful forests, our wonderful mountain range, blue, clear skies. And if you look right in that corner there, you could almost see the waters that we rely upon every day. Now, this one's a bit more subtle. Let's see if you can tell the difference between this photo and this one. Okay, I see a big metal tower, a fire there, and black smoke in our air. And one of the issues with pictures is you can't hear it, right? You can't hear that big metal tower screaming at you during these events. And we'll do one more. Let's say you're a Kitimat resident, you go to the Chalet, a bit of a nicer restaurant in town, You have a nice suit, you're there with your family, you're eating your burger or your steak. And you look outside the window while you're eating. What do you see? Well, you see this big metal tower, a flame, and black smoke in your community. Now, I want you to kind of shift your perspective a little bit as, perhaps a healthcare professional. You see a lot of smoke. What is this doing to your vulnerable populations? What is this doing to the residents who rely upon you every single day? How will this black smoke affect their body systems? How will it affect their outcomes, right? So let's go through another photo here, just to kind of paint the image. Here's one of our never-ending bright sky there in the night. Here's another one. This one was taken on the roads outside of our town. You know, you might have seen this yourself. This is the immense amounts of pollution and light pollution that you get to see coming out of your town. So I want to shift gears a little bit here. I want to talk about my experience as a nurse in an LNG-facing community. And what I'm seeing is increased symptoms, first of all. When I talked about these vulnerable populations, you know, we have a community that is filled with a disproportionate amount of people who are suffering from respiratory disease, from cardiovascular disease. And, you know, you can think of the asthma, the COPD. What does this do to them? Well, what I'm hearing from community members is I'm hearing increased symptomology. They're saying when they're having this black smoke in the community, when they're having increased emissions, when this is entering their lungs and their body, they're saying they're coughing more. They're having more difficulty breathing. And they're having respiratory irritation. So as Grace said earlier, you know, have some curiosity. What is the connection between these two? They're saying that this is happening around the same time. Could this be related in some circumstance? You know, they're also saying that they're relying on these medications more often. You know, as Tim mentioned earlier, some of the residents who are facing the worst outcomes rely on puffers or bronchodilators to open up their airway. And what they're saying is during these peak flaring times, they're having to rely on these medications just to exist in the community. They're relying on these more often, whether they're going gardening, they're going for a walk in the community, or getting groceries. They're having to use these more often just to exist in the community. And, you know, the final piece is increasing questions. We know that this is an experiment. It has not been done under these conditions, under these restraints. And an industry like this has not been attempted like this before in this manner. So the community is left with questions. We're wondering what is going to happen to us, what's going to happen to our friends, our family, what are the final impacts, and what are the full ramifications going to be, right? And I want to end off with you hearing from some of our residents directly. You know, within Canada's first LNG export plant, and again, these are your neighbors in a town one over. Even in the morning, it was like 75 to 80 decibels. Inside my bedroom, we got maybe 2 hours of sleep this whole weekend. I'm just useless now. My backyard was covered in gray smoke when I was cooking hot dogs. You get the smell for a few seconds. It smells like burnt plastic or burnt styrofoam. Is there going to be, in 40 years from now or in 30 years from now, the incidence of cancer growing through the roof? I've been having like a cough, runny nose, headache at nighttime. My boy, the same thing. I'm at a wit's end with the noise and the smoke. I built this house with my own hands. I dug the foundation. I poured the concrete. I put everything I own, all my savings into it. Now I can't even sleep in my own house. My house was lit up like daylight, shaking from the noise. On top of that, there was an ear-piercing whistle. And this is heavy. This is direct quotes from some of the residents living in my community. And, you know, as sorry as I am to say this, I believe it really does need to be heavy. These are made by decision makers, community representatives, people who were elected to represent us that have allowed these questions to enter our community. They have allowed our community members to feel like this. These are the questions that we're going to be stuck with for generations to come. So it's a very difficult picture inside Kitimat right now. And I want to provide a little summary of where we are. You know, we're seeing that residents are reporting health harms. You know, as Tim outlined, we're seeing health data gaps, especially in benzene. It isn't being monitored consistently enough in our region. We need to improve our monitoring and our research in this area, and we need a cumulative health impact assessment. As he said, we can't piecemeal every single piece of this. You know, LNG Canada is a company that is flaring. It's not fracking. You know, fracking doesn't exist in Kitimat. LNG Canada is not a fracking company. We just use fracked gas from Dawson Creek. So fracking is being done. It's being pipelined across our province. We're flaring in Kitimat. We're shipping it across the world, and we're combusting it there. So we need a proper picture of what is going on. We need a full picture of assessment. So I want to end off with, you know, a call to action. What can you do? And this part is incredibly important because there's action you can do right now that would help us have these discussions and have accountability from our governments in providing a clear line of entry for industry to enter. So we have a survey here, and it's so incredibly important that you all take out your phone and do the survey, because the response that we get from this community is what lets us continue to have these discussions and push for more accountability of our industries. So I'll leave this up for a moment. Please try and get through this survey. It's quite quick. You could finish in about a minute or two. We'll circle back to this. This will be back up during the question period. So what can we do? We can send a letter. We can send a letter to ask to halt LNG expansion until our health impacts are studied. We can look before we leap. We are pushing for this, but we need to take a second to understand, what are we really doing to our province, our fellow community members, our people? How is what's happening in Kitimat affecting residents of your community, right? You can meet with your MLA and MP. These are your elected decision makers. These are the people who are meant to represent you, people you chose to be in power, and because of that, they are burdened to listen to your needs, and reach the same goals that you want to achieve, which is the health of all citizens in the province. You know, you can volunteer. Our associations, the Canadian Association of Nurses for the Environment, the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment, the Lac-Sept Firekeepers, and My Sea to Sky, we're actively looking for people who are willing to have this conversation, people who are willing to ask about our health as a community. So now we get to a more engaging part of the presentation for you. We're going to enter a Q&A where you get to ask your questions. You get to connect with our health professionals, our Indigenous land protectors, and see what's going on in your community and see what's happening here. I'll take a moment and pass this off to Tracy here to get it kicked off.
Thank you, Ankur. I'd like to invite all of our speakers to come and join me up here. And our runners, our question runners.
Patricia Lange. I'm from Douglas Channel Watch in Kitimat. And I just have a question to Dr. Tim about the monitors. I think that you said that there probably were not enough, and you talked about the hot spots and the roaming. So when we, at Douglas Channel Watch, meets with LNG sometimes, what ask should we ask them? Because what we're seeing from the Kitimat Airshed group is that the levels are very, very low. And we're hearing from LNG, and it's publicly reported on Kitimat Airshed Group's site that the levels of these serious pollutants are so low. So where is that gap, and what should we ask for?
Thanks for the question. So the first point I would make is that some of the contaminants are not measured. So benzene is the most obvious missing measurement. The other problem is, I think, with the location of the stationary monitors and the constituent gases that they measure. So you're pretty good on sulfur dioxide, but all of the pollutants, in particular PM 2.5 and NO2, should be measured at all of the stations. And with regards to the roving air monitor, it should be in Kitimat at this time, right? We know there's problems with this flare at the moment. We know this because of the volume of gas being flared. So we should be looking for these hot spots. We should have the roaming air monitor operating all the time while there are problems going on with the flare. When the volumes get above what's permitted, there should be roving air monitoring going on, and frankly, there should be more permanent air monitors in a community that's facing the kind of stresses that this community faces.
Question at the back there.
Hi, thanks for your presentations tonight. I'm Sarah Zimmerman. I'm a counselor with the City of Terrace. And one of the action items that we've been considering is on the topic of air monitors and whether there's even enough monitoring of impacts as far as Terrace and kind of where our airshed goes to, particularly east of town or west of town towards Prince Rupert. And the question being, who do we ask for more monitors? So I think that there's been a couple different funders for the monitors that are out there, but is that something that happens through Northern Health? Do we advocate through that through Kitimat Airshed Group? Does it go to industry? Who would be responsible for establishing a new location? How do we best support that, and whether it's necessary? And then, does this mobile unit exist and it's down, or is it a thing that could happen in this area? Sorry, two questions.
I'll start with the last one. So the roaming air monitor, the RAM, does exist. It's actually deployed in the Northeast right now, looking at fracking. So yes, it could be redeployed here. That's a message, right, that it's not here because there are other problem areas. And it's absolutely true. There are other airsheds in British Columbia that are worse. So I don't want to say, oh, we'll take it from them and bring it here. I want to say, get another one, get two more. And with regards to and it should be electric van anyway.
Sorry, Tim, she's asking, who does that come from?
Yep, so I'm just going to that. The roaming air monitor is financed by the BC Energy Regulator because these emissions are coming from operations regulated by them. In Terrace, it would be a different question, but you're a councillor, you should have an audience with the energy regulator. If they're not going to do it, is the Ministry of Health going to do it? Is the Minister of Environment and Parks going to do it? Frankly, to me, it is the Ministry of Energy, and they call themselves Climate Solutions. So with climate solution comes responsibility. And for my perspective, that is the most likely source. The BC Energy Regulator, as you probably know, is financed by industry. And it's important to, thanks. It's important to follow the money. So there is plenty of money. It's just not in the right place. There are incredible profits being made by these industries every year for the last several years. Excuse me, massive profit. So there is money. It needs to be put to good use.
I would also add that one of the things that we are looking at doing in Squamish is independently fundraising enough money so that we can get a BTEX monitor in Squamish to collect an entire year of baseline data before this industry starts flaring. Industry should be paying for it. Government should be making them pay for it, but it should be independently monitored, and it needs to be there full time. It's something that Kitimat and Terrace might also want to consider, but I think that we need to start demanding this because our health is not being protected. If we have these massive data gaps and if we don't have baseline data, it allows industry to point fingers at each other. So we really need to know what that baseline is, and we need to know what we're being exposed to, sorry. So you had a couple of questions back there.
There's two, yeah.
Do you know if there's independent monitoring that's being done in mobile units in BC? I've heard about it in the States, but I've never heard of any in BC.
Yeah, we don't know of any independent monitoring going on anywhere in Canada, frankly, but certainly not in British Columbia. It's a good question. I'm really on the fence about why should a nonprofit organization be raising money for something that the government is responsible for, protecting our health, right? it shouldn't be on the backs of citizens and citizen groups. It should be on the backs of our government, and our government should be collecting adequate revenue from the industry that's polluting the air. It's a standard principle. Polluter pays.
Thank you for the presentation tonight. My name is Paula Smith. I'm an elected counselor for Haisla Nation, so I'm one of the decision makers. When we sit in front of industry, we have Rio Tinto blaming LNG Canada for pollution, and then we have LNG Canada blaming Rio Tinto for pollution. And then we have LNG Canada take a table of about 20 to our building, and they talk about the great numbers that they have, that they're under the baseline. And I stood up and said, my concern is that we have a company monitoring themselves. I'm very grateful to be here tonight, and I'm wondering, do you do like Skype? Do you guys do virtual?
Yeah.
Can I connect with one of you after? I think it's very important. A lot of my counterparts couldn't be here tonight, and I think it's very important for them to hear this as leaders, and potentially even our hereditary chiefs to hear it as well. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. We will absolutely follow up directly with you. We're very grateful that you came tonight and would be more than happy to do this presentation remotely with your council members. Yeah.
I also just wanted to thank you for speaking. Yeah, you can join Kate, but also the firekeepers would love to have an opportunity to chat with you as well. I know we want to connect with other nations, but it's also really important that you're pointing out that industry is pointing fingers at each other. It's a classic thing that not only industry does, but government. There's so many cases. You could look at Jordan's principle, where in which they actually had to designate because government wasn't taking accountability. They just started passing off responsibility to each other instead of actually addressing the issue that was being caused. So clearly a very strong tactic. Industry is a lot closer with one another than you would think. So thank you for saying something.
And down here as well, Kate.
Hi, my name's Larissa Tarwick, and I came to Terrace in 1975 to work here for a couple of years and run away back to the big city. So I'm still here. But I am an environmentalist. I come from a family who believe that we all need to keep our nation and our country and our people safe, healthy, and wealthy. That wealth is the issue in this region. Because working people and poor people in this region have to find ways to live. Yes, we can live off the land, and many people do, but we have need and an understanding. So working people around this room and in this area understand why we have to fight it. I'm making a speech, but I want, this work needs to be done, and the work needs to be collaborative, and working people need to hear this.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that point. And I think it is very important to reflect on where the money is and where it is going. And also, what is it that are the most fundamental aspects, say, of our health system? Our health system would be nothing without clean air, clean water, nutritious food, and a safe place to lay your head. Those are the fundamentals of health. I would just put to you something that one of my Indigenous colleagues reminds many of the health officers, that the ecosystem is our health system. So understanding and working through where is the money, where's the wealth, where is it going, what is the cost of the economy as it is in the region? What is the personal cost? What are the benefits? What are alternatives? What are alternative ways of making a good living that are not destructive of the air, water, and food supply?
I would just add to that, our government is choosing fossil fuels as that primary economic driver right now. It doesn't have to be that way. It could be a very different choice. They could be choosing to invest in renewable energy instead. They could be choosing to invest in ecosystem restoration so that we can actually have clean air and water and have the abundance that used to exist here before we destroyed it. So I think that we are at this crossroads, and it is a choice that is being made, and it is not necessarily a good one.
Good evening. My name is Marilyn Bourassa. I'm Dr. Bourassa from Northern Health. I know this file fairly closely, and I'm pursuing to know it even better. And I have a question for Dr. Takaro. What's the relationship between the governmental BC energy regulator, and please explain what their role is, with the LNG industry?
Yeah, a very important question. Thank you. So the BC Energy Regulator, formerly known as the BC Oil and Gas Commission, is funded by the industry, as I mentioned, and it receives input on environmental assessments, which include human health risk assessment, from the Environmental Assessment Office. The BC Energy Regulator has no health expertise in the agency. Zero. The Environmental Assessment Office does not have this expertise on staff. It has to ask health authorities, Environment Climate Change Canada or Health Canada, or the Ministry of Health for expert opinions on projects as they come along. And I just want to give an example of how this goes off the rails. So I mentioned Dr. Laura Monet, my research colleague, and we received a grant from the National Science and Engineering Research Council, NSERC, to study the wood fiber LNG facility before it becomes operational. And in order to do that, we need design information about the flare. We're trying to model a best case scenario, what would be optimal operations and optimal conditions in the environment, weather conditions, etc. What would be the best case, what would be the worst case, and what would be a middle case. We can do this with modeling if we have information, pretty simple design information about the flare. Wood fiber LNG obviously has this information. They're more than halfway through building the plant. In order to get their first permit, they need to know and provide to the Environmental Assessment Office that information. The energy regulator also is required by law to understand what those hazards are. When we asked the company, they said, no, we can't give you that. That's proprietary information about the flare design. When we asked the Environmental Assessment Office, they said, we don't have it. When we asked the energy regulator, they too said, we don't have it. We have all this in writing. So there's a gap, a massive gap. And it has been now 8 months
Longer.
with this request.
Longer.
And we're still not closer. We did get a little hint. The energy regulator told the Squamish newspaper that actually they do have the information, as if that's some kind of comfort to us. We still don't. And we cannot do this modeling that we were funded to do. Another aspect, I'm being told I can't go into the next aspect, but my point is that there are many gaps in this relationship between the company, the regulator, which is supposed to be independent, and the government. And that health is not top of mind when a regulator has no health expertise.
Okay, if I've looked you in the eye, I remember that you have a question. I'm going to try to get to everybody. You're all in a queue. I haven't forgotten about you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody who's been presenting. I'm kind of a long-time Terrace resident, Sherry Reedy. I'm a healthcare worker. I appreciate the overall concerns that you've all brought and the underlying premise that ecology is paramount, but I just kind of want to go back to my ears perked up about the kitchens and the benzene levels in our kitchens. And my husband and I are increasingly noting respiratory symptoms. And we've always had a natural gas stove. Natural gas, love those words. And I wondered if, when we bought that house 36 years ago, was that fracked gas at that time? Is it different now? Should we be ditching that stove, and should all of us be ditching those stoves?
Yes.
Thank you.
That's a pretty easy question to answer, and it is yes. We should be electrifying everything that we can electrify, which is almost everything. And so in the case of cooking, you'll be surprised how many world-class chefs really like induction stoves. And if you ever have used one, you'll really like it too. Mm-hmm. I am a proud owner of an electric vehicle, and I know that I'm a privileged person in order to be able to afford that. But to be honest, it pays itself back in way before the lifetime of the car in terms of the savings, especially now with gas prices the way they are. You can easily justify that if you have the ability to pay forward. We should be electrifying all of our heating through heat exchangers and heat pumps. There are geothermal methods for heating homes, and that's been shown in many areas in the north to be very feasible. So electrify everything.
I'd just add, my partner and I saved up to get a heat pump, and we removed the gas appliances, all of the gas appliances from our home. We have noticed a huge difference in air quality inside our home. We also have a HRV system, a heat recovery ventilator system, so we have fresh air coming in all the time. And there's a couple of big benefits. One, not only is our home really cozy in winter, and I don't feel guilty about that because, it's all electric. We have this fresh air coming in all the time, and it's a noticeable difference in an old house that was built in 1967. But when it's really, really hot outside, the heat pump can also cool your home, and that's becoming more and more important as we're seeing these heat domes and the extreme heat in the summer. And the final benefit is that when there is wildfire smoke, we have a filtration system that we recirculate the air inside our house so that we are still breathing clean air inside our home when I can't go outside. I literally can't see the trees outside because of the wildfire smoke. So that's a really big difference too.
Yeah, I also just wanted to add on, I'm sure you most likely know this as a healthcare provider, but just for other individuals in the room, the impacts are also a lot more prominent in women and children because of our lung sizes. So when we're taking into account what it is we're dealing with when it comes to VOCs, benzene, whatever it is in your home, it will be impacting women and children a lot more. And this is also something that we know from healthcare workers in Dawson Creek, that we're seeing a lot of increase in leukemia in children, which is a very heavily industrialized town. So it's just another thing to keep in mind. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I know we're trying to move on here, but I have one more point I just got to make. You will, and maybe somebody will ask me a question about artificial intelligence and the data centers. So go ahead, please.
My name is Pamela Wright. I'm an elected member for the Laclazat Village Government, and so my partner here, and he mentioned this, and we just heard about it a couple weeks ago, and I'm very happy to be here. And thank you for your presentation. As you were saying earlier, that, you know, numbers don't lie and money doesn't lie, but people do. And that's one line that I will always say, coming from an accounting background as well. Follow the money and you will follow where it goes. Exactly your points about providing division within First Nations and our neighboring people. Take DFO with the fishery demonstration that they do. Puts a rift between the Niska Nation and also the Gitneo over our resources. How do we get this information out? I'm really appreciative of all the people that came here tonight, and we're after time, but how do we get this out to more people, get it online? I took pictures of the questionnaire, and I'll definitely be sharing it on my social media. We just came from a clean energy conference in Vancouver that talked about solar, wind, geothermal. We as a planet, Earth is an energy world and an energy planet, and we need to do it in a better way by harnessing the renewables for a sustainable future. Data centers, I didn't know what these were. I saw it on Facebook, here in your community bulletin board, and it caught my eye, but I still didn't know what it was. And I found out a lot by a Safeway worker in Vancouver. And he took the time to really talk to me about it because it's a real big concern. They had a march down there that I didn't know of. I wish I would have known about it. But this is also threatening the health of our communities, not only our water, but once again, our air. And I think that we need to hold more of these town hall meetings to get the word out there and also to spread it. So everyone here, go home, tell 10 people, and then tell them to tell 10 people about these beautiful people up here who are trying to make a difference and shine a light on this very important issue. And thank you so much again, and safe travels. And I would love to have you in our community to tell our people about the sea-lisms that is eventually coming our way as well. And everyone saw it this yesterday and today on the news. Thank you.
Test. If I could just add to that, just a very brief point. At this point in time, that data center is a proposal. It is something that an industrial capitalist wants to impose upon our community. This is the time when we can act. This is the time to have these discussions when the proposals are being put forward. So it's so incredibly important that you bring this up now, because the community needs to act. The community needs to have these discussions. And this is the time for us to make a difference if we care about this coming into our community. So thank you for that comment.
Yeah, I was just going to add about the data centers that they should not be fueled by gas, and they should not be stealing electricity from the other needs that we just discussed. The solar power is the future. And yeah, people say, oh, well, we don't have enough sun here or whatever. That is not true. With solar now, you can collect power even on a cloudy day, and you can store it. I am shocked to see 0 solar panels in Kitimat or Terrace. This is a time when we should be investing in the future, which is if you have 300 homes on a system that is distributed energy with storage and solar, you don't need new power plants. That's enough. 300 homes is the threshold. So get to it.
Up here.
One more up here. Okay, great. Sorry, you've been waiting a long time. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you very much for a wonderful evening and all your intelligence. I have a different health aspect that I have been concerned about ever since I knew LNG Canada was coming to Kitimat. And that is, I wondered what else might be coming ashore on these tankers. Because we are not the port of Prince Rupert, where they have $1 million equipment checking things. We're not the port of Vancouver. But we might have 3 different LNG projects up here. And who's checking what's coming off? So I did some research. And lo and behold, in the port of Montreal, the first little boat that would go out to the ship was taking the garbage off the ship. And they were actually garbage containers full of you-know-what, drugs. So I'm very concerned about who's looking after that part of our communities. And the other thing is, as far as I know, Terrace is the second largest drug abuse community per capita in this province. Thank you.
Just to give her a quick round of applause. That's a very important question to have. And just to start off on that, Kitimat is a town that has been inundated with industry workers. You see it in Rio Tinto and now again with LNG. And many of these people are fellow community members, people I call my friends, and people who I truly enjoy the company of in my daily life. But it's really important, as Grace and Drew have both, pardon me, as they have said, what does it do when you have new fly-in, fly-out workers, when you have new tankers coming upon your shores? How does it impact how a community functions? I grew up in Kitimat, and I grew up during this time that our population is changing, and I can speak on a personal level. Many of my friends, my fellow community members, they felt more unsafe. The female colleagues I was surrounded with, they felt scared of sexual violence, of new members that are entering our communities, and we're seeing this across our community profile. So it's a really important question to ask. How can we absorb this? How can we absorb the possibility of new substances entering the community? What is this going to do to our healthcare system? What is this going to do to our brothers and sisters? So it's a really important question to get ahead of. So thank you for asking that.
How many more questions have we got, Kate? 2 more questions.
And then one up front, and then we can close.
Okay.
I was im Geget, Sekramana, Ankur Wilsis, Denise, Takose, Skyze. My name is Guilochem Gabu, or also known as Jesse Stopler. I really want to thank you for the wonderful presentation, and I want to thank everyone that's here for showing up and for indulging into that. Before I actually get my comment out, I thought about this for a while. I wanted to ask a quick clarifying question. I heard we were talking about, there was a comment earlier about working people need to hear this, and I don't really know what that means. Are you talking about the working class, or like who's working people?
Oh, she's gone.
Oh, sorry. Well, I guess we'll never know. I'll make an assumption. What I wanted to say is, I've had an opportunity to travel to Australia, and conditions were very similar, but probably between 30 and 40 years ahead in some of their projects. This is also based on boom and bust conditions around LNG. We're seeing public resources being used, taxpayer money, to heavily subsidize these projects to enrich, once again, foreign owners as well. That is, at the bottom line, when we're trying to figure out, is the juice worth the squeeze for us here? Hard to imagine that we're able and willing to take all of these risks to our health, to our future, to our environment, to enrich 100% foreign owners in any and all of these projects, Xilisms or LNG Canada. Sorry, my back is hurting. And the main objective for me was to learn, what does this look like when we skip forward 20, 30, 40 years? Where are these elected leaders that make promises? Where's industry that says flaring only lasts for like 2 years maximum? Well, I spoke to the locals, and they told me the flaring has never changed. It's been 30 years of flaring. That's quite dangerous. Are we inviting that to our home? Are we willing to double down right now and see LNG Canada Phase 2? I don't think so. The same goes for Xilisms, in my opinion. But I wanted to leave you with a reminder that even political will, what we seem to lack the most, is a renewable resource. Thanks.
For some context, Jesse is a co-executive director of Skeena Watershed Conservation Coalition. He holds a lot of knowledge on this topic in particular. He's also been involved in court case litigation with industry, and he's not just a concerned citizen, he's also someone who's working and doing and educating. So thank you, Jesse, for your words.
Hi, I think I have the last question. Thank you. I was just wondering, so ostensibly, the pitch from LNG is, okay, we come into these communities, we offer these jobs for workers. We're coming into communities, we want to enrich communities, et cetera. Assuming, not even assuming, I don't believe that personally, but going along with that sort of line of reasoning, I am wondering in terms of like, we're talking about health outcomes, we're talking about issues with communities, et cetera, and we're also talking about, calling in people from, other maybe affiliations, et cetera. We have family members, friends who are within these industries. I was wondering if you had had any experience with folks who entered those industries maybe in good faith, and came away, say, with negative health outcomes or encounters with, drugs or increasing mental health issues, et cetera. Do you have any advice for folks who maybe that's the position they're in, or they have family or friends, that's the position they're in, and like how to call them across and maybe say like, hey, join us in sort of calling out these like egregious behaviors. And then in particular, again, because the line is sort of like, oh, these are great jobs, you're gonna have, you'll make money, et cetera. Are we seeing, this is sort of particularly in a nursing sort of question, are you seeing particular health outcomes coming from folks working in industry? Like, are they not maybe even more affected than other people? Like I am, as much as I'm concerned for the environment, I am wondering in particular about the workers. Thank you.
Totally, and so I'm getting two questions here. First, how to call on our community members, friends, families who are in these industries and how to reach out to them, and also the occupational health harms that we're seeing from industry workers. And, first and foremost, it's an understanding of how much risk we're allowed to let into life, starting with the second question, how much risk we're willing to expose our fellow Canadians to. And we know that our industry and our commercial community standards are different. The amount of exposure that we are willing to risk our workers to is much higher. The standards we pose to those different communities are different. And, because we're imposing different standards, we know we're going to see different outcomes. If we're willing to let these workers face these exposures in hopes to provide money, food, resources to their families to be breadwinners. We are exposing them to this. We know that they are going to have worse outcomes in the long term. Kitimat, we have a long history of industry. We know Rio Tinto is how Kitimat, the town has started. And as a result, we've seen higher rates of cancer. We've seen higher rates of impact in these industry workers. So the story is already there. The story has already happened with Rio Tinto. Now we're willing to let it happen a second time with LNG Canada. So just to get to that point, and to address the second question, how do we reach across to our fellow, our friends, our community members, our fellow BC citizens? And to start off, I'll let these guys take a good whack at that, but start off with kindness, start off with curiosity, allow them to share their experiences and really try and be open to why they are where they're at and how we can connect with them before we dig into how we can change them. I think that's always a really strong place to start from, with curiosity, as Gru here has said earlier.
To answer your questions, it's yes to both. Living in a small community, you hear a lot of stories of the culture that's bred within camps. So I would say yes, there's probably a lot of people that don't enjoy working in camps, but they do it because they're making a living. You can just hear that from having a regular conversation with probably most likely anybody that works in a camp, is they're all probably pretty upset to be going back in there, but they're happy with the money that they're making. To address your second question of are we seeing health impacts in particular, absolutely yes. You can see these most prevalent in Dawson Creek. Drew and I last September were down in Vancouver with a lot of physicians, Canadian Association of Physicians with the Environment, and we were talking to ministers. In particular, we were talking to Adrian Dix and Christine Boyle. Adrian is the Minister of Energy and Climate Solutions. We had a doctor who lived in Dawson Creek sharing all of the increase of leukemia in children, all of the increase in cancer they're seeing among the long-term residents. And Adrian's response was, well, we're doing better than Alberta. What are we supposed to do? Solar's not going to do everything. So that's who's representing us, just so everyone is aware. So I would say if you're looking for a reason to tell someone to go out and find another career opportunity, there are so many individuals that would love to have someone who's had experience in the realm of consulting. I think even just being in university, you see a lot of people unaware of what they want to do for a career, so they go and they choose something secure. And then that's usually what ends up making a difference when I'm sitting at a table with someone that went into a career to have security versus the other half of the table that went into something that they were passionate about and wanted to make a difference. And that's no shade. There's a lot of people that have left their careers and they now work in consulting, and they help us and they help give us the contacts and information we need. So yeah, you made a lot of really good points, and the answer to all of them was yes.
I want to take a moment to just thank everybody for bearing with us. I know we've gone over time this evening, but we felt this was a really important conversation to have. So we're grateful to everybody in the audience for being here tonight, for listening, for asking such incredible questions. We've also learned from you this evening, so thank you. I'd like to ask everybody to please join me in thanking our expert speakers. I'd also like to take a moment to thank the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment, Canadian Association of Nurses for the Environment, and Acute Firekeepers, and also acknowledge our other partners and support for this event, Skeena Watershed Conservation Association and Dogwood, and all of our incredible volunteers that have made this event possible. We're very grateful to you, to Matt for the awesome sound this evening, thank you. And I just, sorry? Nick. Yes, and to Nick. That it was all-encompassing. There's lots of volunteers here tonight. There's Vanya, there's so many. Jesse, Kai. Kate, I'd like to take a moment to thank you. It's Kate McInnes that came to me as a volunteer 3 years ago in Squamish now, and she said, well, she asked me the question, it was like, has anybody looked into how the flaring is going to impact human health? And I said, well, we sort of talked about it a little bit in 2014 when we participated in the environmental assessment, but they didn't really give us a lot of information, so no. And she asked, can I start digging into this? I have a background as an investigative journalist. And I'm like, yes, please. So a lot of the reason that we are here tonight is because of Kate's hard work and dedication as a volunteer. And I just want everybody to please thank her. And to close out the evening, I'd like to call Chief Namox to the stage.
I scare everybody every time I pack a notebook. Don't worry, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I am hereditary Chief Namox. I'm also caretaker of the chiefly title of Quees. I'm the highest ranking chief of the Beaver Clan of the Wet'suwet'en. Each time I listen to this panel, I get so much more faith and inspiration in what we do, because I don't want any of you to go through what we did when we were fighting Coastal GasLink. I don't want them burning down your houses. I don't want them sending attack dogs at you. I don't want snipers on the roof every time you step outside. If you have this information and know it, it is the biggest weapon that you have. The chiefly title of Quees that I carry is actually a war chief. And I'll tell you something about war chiefs. The last thing we truly want is war, because they die and we die. But what you need is strategy. What you need is information. That's what you got here. For myself, and I'm being as unbiased as I possibly can, because these two young ladies here are my heroes. So we listened to, at the beginning, the very fact that when they release information, and I'm talking about either government or industry, it's incomplete. They'll give you words, but there's no ending to it, and there's no facts behind it. Or they'll send you to another department. They'll keep you running in circles. They'll never give you no end answer. You've heard the truth here. You heard it from the ladies and you heard it from the gentlemen. Truth truly is power, and you need to use it properly. You know, when we talk about climate change, you know, they're back to denying that it's there. You know, with Coastal GasLink, the big thing they did with us is saying, oh, we're going to get China off coal. Has it happened? So, you know, when you think about LNG and the flare stacks, you know, they showed a picture of the flare stack. That thing was over 200 feet. I'm old school, over 60. I still use feet and yards. But if you actually think about that, and then it's going 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, then they say, oh yeah, well, we have equipment failure. We don't have the equipment to replace it. So we'll just keep on doing what we're doing because, hey, we're only killing you. That's all we're doing. The investors, they don't live here. The oil and the gas that is produced in Canada is going overseas. It's not for you. You got to know what we know. The very fact that those who control the resource control the country. They talked about politicians and then going to them and then which avenue to go down. Again, I'm trying not to be jaded, but I believe that politicians are like dirty diapers and they should be changed and changed regularly. So when we think about the health aspects of it, you know, the different types of cancers, and we've had opportunities over the decades to travel to places that have dealt with LNG and oil and then everything that's associated with it. And one place we went to, they called Chemical Valley, 93 chemical plants, all surrounding an indigenous community. You look at the headstones on the grave sites and they're all in their 40s. That's not a lifespan, if you ask me. Talk about the birth defects, premature births from just breathing the air. That's not in any of their reports that they give. You know, when the young lady said, don't be afraid to ask questions, you have that right to ask that question. Because if you ask the right questions, that gives you more power to stand up and speak and be united. They spoke about the divide and conquer tactics that they're using. They want us as human beings to fight. You heard it from them. That way they can continue on while we're over here battling each other, when we should be speaking with one voice. You know, when they talk about the permitting, the different aspects of it, and then who controls it, and then you hear the truth that it's actually oil and gas industry that is controlling what the rules are to suit themselves. The fox watching the hen house. And then they get no penalties for it. Give us a report. When we were dealing with CGL, I think overall the penalties that were given to them were, I don't know, $100 million somewhere in there, which is couch change when you're talking to a $30 billion project. 1.7. See, told you he was smart. But if you actually think about, if you do it properly, and their only incentive is money, not the health of the community, not the health of the people, not looking after the environment for the future generations, make them spend more money. With us, with what we did, we cost CGL, they estimate between $8 and $10 billion extra. Make them follow that money. Make them wonder and give that money a conscience, because humans are supposed to have a conscience. Money doesn't, but give that money a conscience. Give them the information that you have here, because the information that you're getting right here is how you're going to continue to survive, how your children are going to continue to survive, how your grandchildren are going to survive. We all call this place home. We should be able to look after it. Guilakam Gabu and I, we were in Gatineau, Quebec last July when the Prime Minister of this country introduced Bill C-5. And he basically said, if you stand up for clean water, clean air, democracy, which is supposed to be part of this country, you're a criminal, because Bill C-5 is the law. We have law. They introduced it to you, LAW, land, air, water. That should always come first, because that's what we survive on. When you think about the different types of health concerns, which they don't consider a concern, you know, asthma, breathing, lungs, heart attacks, they don't even consider that, because if you give them a question on it, again, they'll send you in another direction and you won't get the answers. Dr. Takaro said that to you. They'll send you, oh, well, from one agency to another agency, they don't really have the answers. Unfortunately, right now, money is the only goal that they have. I said it at a previous meeting. They put a bounty on each of us in this country for something that is actually ours and should stay where it belongs, in the ground. I heard during question period, natural gas. The only place it's natural is if it's still in the ground. It's unnatural when you take it out of the ground. You know, we had a lot of experiences, some of it not good, and we wouldn't want that on anybody. I'd invite you all to watch a documentary. We have Yinta. It follows 10 years of us on the territory, what happened to us. But I don't want that to happen to you, because I want you to be here. I want your children to be here. I want your grandchildren to be here, and a place that is healthy, because there are very few places on this planet that are like where you live right now. We talked about the pipelines, the explosions. We went to Malaysia to talk to the people there, and also to give Petronas an eviction notice. That was fun. But they made it sound like that pipe explosion happened out in the middle of nowhere. It was actually in a community. Houses blown up. When we were there, the stop signs were still melted. They got that pipe going again within weeks, but they hadn't rebuilt that community. That's how little humans mean to them. You know, when we talk about protection, we often get sidetracked with what is out there, whether it be in media, the usual media, or social media. And you have to realize that you need to control that narrative. You are the living experiences, not them. We talked about jobs, the fly in, the fly out. You know, our people were promised jobs. Oh, there were people went out, got new vehicles, new houses. The jobs lasted 2 years and they were done. That was it. You talk about the social impacts of drugs when it was brought in by boats, that was mentioned by one of the ladies here. It skyrocketed. You talk about the health impacts. They'll say, oh, well, we have our own people trained in these man camps to look after over 90% of the incidents that'll happen. But we don't even have the health care that we need here now, never mind if it is only 10%. Every camp will have anywhere from 800 to 1,200 men. So you got 1,000 people, 10%, that's 100 more than what the health care providers can provide for those who live here. You know, when we always say follow the money because it was great. That's exactly how you get equipment. You follow that money and you make them pay for it. But we had to learn the hard way. If you're going to follow the money, follow it to the big boys and talk to the big boys. Deter those investors. Make them know that these things are unsafe, unsure, and there is no profit in there. Do you know that your taxpayer money is the incentive given to these corporations to come and build these projects? Whether it be a pension. You think about the Canadian Investment Bank. We had a meeting with them just to make them understand we know exactly what you're doing. Your Canadian pension plan, which you have no choice, we have to pay in the day you start working in, they've invested over $20 billion into the gas industry without telling you. I have another meeting with them next week. That's going to be fun. You think about the pressures that are put onto our doctors and nurses. You know, being understaffed, being stressed out, the threats of violence coming to them, because people in pain will act out in whatever way, and usually to the closest person to them. You think about them not being able to replace the doctors and nurses that are already leaving. And at one point, British Columbia was given incentives to doctors to come to British Columbia, but where they were sending it, and I can talk about Dawson Creek, the doctors there were moving out because they can't live there because the air is so bad. How are you going to live where you can't raise your children? And you're there to help people? You have to move away so you could survive? And this is Canada's answer for us? You know, when we ask somebody, I have to be accountable. I'm a hereditary chief. I don't do nothing until my people tell me to do. I can't just get up, oh, I want to do this. No, it's the people that tell me what to do and then you do it. Because I have to be accountable. And I want each of you to make these people accountable. There are some good people out there. Mostly I'm going to say in municipalities because they are your neighbors. They live here too. Use them. You voted for them. I'm pretty jaded. Provincially and federally, the people that I deal with, whether I want to or not, I have to. But some of them do have a conscience. Some of them do have ethics. You spoke about the ethics. Nurses and doctors have to get it. You know, these industries, they don't have to have it. They have none to follow. But if you actually talk about politicians and remind them, ethically, they should be answerable to us. Recently, was it Gilbo, whatever, he just resigned because he had ethics. You know what? We just come from Dr. David Suzuki's 90th birthday, and he was telling me, you know, he voted for Carney because the book that he wrote, and that was about, you know, looking forward to the future and looking after global climate affairs. And he said if he'd have known now what he knew back then, he wouldn't have voted for him, because the whole progress of this country now has changed from looking after the future, not only of this country, but the world itself, to just a money ethic. You have to realize if they continue on this path, they put a bounty on each one of you. They put a bounty on your children and your grandchildren. If money is their answer, that's not humane. I deal with the United Nations. Young ladies again talked about World Health Organization. The work that they do through there is actually to let the world know what is happening in Canada. You need to get a hold of these organizations and voice your thoughts, because what we heard from you tonight was just amazing. You have your voice. You need to stand up in unity and use it, because without them hearing from you, they're only hearing from industry and government. That's all they're listening to right now. You have that opportunity to use that voice. You've got information. I so admire this panel, because if you think about what could happen for just simply speaking the truth and nobody listened, terrible things. But if you listen to what the information is, that's power, that's truth, and that's the future. They also talked about the divide and conquer again one more time. You don't have to hate the player, but you sure as hell can hate the game. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chief Nimox, for those words of wisdom.